Well, first, congratulations for the TV show, and tell me something about how you prepare yourself physically and mentally for the role.
I just, it's kind of a responsibility comes with playing a real historical figure, and particularly when they've perpetrated such heinous crimes. And so I really I felt my biggest responsibility was just getting to the truth of the matter and not necessarily trying to understand the crimes themselves, but like the man behind them and why he did what he did. And so I just read everything. I read, the thing that was most valuable was all of his medical records. It's like a tomb like this of medical records because he'd been incarcerated in a mental hospital for 30 years and there was about 120 psychological evaluations done on him. And so I read all of those and they were really, really helpful to try to understand who he was.
And what was the shooting? I like to know what was the biggest challenge and what did you do when you go to your house or to the hotel to relax?
Well, the biggest challenge is always the scenes. Like you probably, if you watch the show, I bet you'd be able to identify which the biggest challenges are just from watching the scenes. It's always the scenes that require the biggest emotional lift. Like there's a scene in episode 7 that was by far and away the hardest scene in the show to shoot. And it's when Ed has a huge emotional breakdown and I had to cry and sort of have a bit of a nervous breakdown on camera. And, you always think as an actor, like I understand the scene, I understand what's required, but you always have in the back of your mind, am I going to have the skill set to be able to deliver it on the day? And so it wasn't actually necessarily like the darker stuff that was the most difficult. It was always the really emotional stuff that I always get most nervous about.
Besides the label of true crime, the TV show has an important message for mental issues. Did you attract this to be part of the Monster TV show?
Yes, I think I understand your question. Just in terms of the shows are always about something in their themes and about something. Yeah, I mean, I think that, I really believe in storytelling, that we have a function in society, the way it always has, this tradition of us understanding ourselves a little bit better by telling these stories. And I think that the darker parts of society and the darker stories have just as much value because it's very difficult to understand Ed Gein and why he did what he did. And I think Ryan in this show does an amazing job of charting the regression of his mental health and through isolation and through abuse and through exposure to these terrible images, the path that took him to becoming a monster. And then asks the question about, like, was Alfred Hitchcock also a monster? Because he took this man's life and as inspiration for entertainment and, made Psycho and sort of darkened the global psyche in the process. And is Ryan Murphy the monster for then making The Thing a TV show about Ed Gein and about Hitchcock? Or is the audience the monster for continuing to tune in to watch these stories? And I suppose there's all of that, but I personally don't think any of them are the monster. Well, Ed Gein certainly was a monstrous character, but I think that to repeat myself, I think that filmmaking and storytelling in all its forms is an essential way in which we understand ourselves. And boy, if we don't understand ourselves, then we're just destined to keep making mistakes, and some of those mistakes can have terrible consequences.
Of course. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.